Have you ever talked about a delicate topic regarding relationships? A reality that affects many of us more deeply than we might initially realize? We will discuss those unmistakable signs that indicate when it is necessary to definitively end a relationship, even if it involves close family members or dear friends. Many people live trapped in toxic or unbalanced relationships that, rather than enriching their lives, gradually undermine and harm them. Yet, out of fear of losing important people, or, in some cases, fear of feeling alone, we continue to maintain ties that no longer serve a healthy purpose in our lives. Recognizing when a relationship becomes more harmful than beneficial is crucial to preserving your emotional and mental balance. It takes courage to make such decisions, especially when the person in question is a family member or a longtime friend. Still, at some point, we have to acknowledge that we deserve relationships that strengthen us rather than pull us down. Before we begin with the 9 key signs that indicate when it might be time to cut off all contact with someone, whether a friend, a colleague, or even a family member, remember to subscribe to the Mental Dose channel and to our Telegram channel if you haven't yet, so you can stay updated on all of our upcoming videos focusing on personal and spiritual growth. The information we share in these discussions can be transformative if you're open to applying it in your life. Now, let us embark on this journey together, exploring the signals that a relationship may have become so detrimental that ending it, or at least setting firm boundaries, is the healthiest and most self-affirming choice. When we talk about ending a relationship, it doesn't necessarily mean harboring hatred or resentment toward another person. Sometimes it's simply an act of self-preservation and self-love. There are instances where 2 individuals no longer harmonize and cannot meet each other's emotional or psychological needs. Ties that were once supportive and nurturing can become damaging over time due to changes in priorities, personal growth, or the development of harmful patterns. One moment you might be sharing laughter and triumphs. The next, you find yourself locked in emotional battles you never foresaw, feeling a sense of loss for what the relationship used to be. Yet, the struggle to let go persists because of shared history, societal expectations about familial loyalty, or the fear of regret. Often, what stops us from considering a complete break is the internal narrative that family is family, or long-term friendship should survive anything. While such loyalty can be beautiful, if a relationship steadily compromises your dignity, your mental health, and your ability to thrive, then asking yourself tough questions becomes a necessity. You have one life, one mind, one spirit. Choosing to protect these is not selfish. It's an act of wisdom that ultimately allows you to live and interact with others more authentically. If you stay in a harmful relationship too long, the emotional toll can manifest in physical ailments or chronic mental distress. Recognizing red flags doesn't mean you're incapable of forgiveness. Rather, it means you are attentive to the signs that the relationship is affecting you in profound, detrimental ways. To help clarify these complex circumstances, we will dive into 9 indicators. Each one highlights a situation or dynamic that may be pushing you toward the difficult conclusion that cutting off contact is the healthiest path. While these signs often appear in combination, even one of them, sustained over a long period, can be enough to damage your self-esteem and sense of well-being. Reflect on your own experiences as you read, and if you find parallels to ongoing situations in your life, remember that you're not alone. Many people struggle with these same issues, and many have walked the path of severing toxic ties, emerging stronger and more at peace. There is nothing wrong with prioritizing your well-being. Quite often, your sense of personal peace is the best barometer for whether a relationship is healthy or destructive. Let us move into the specific signs now. Constant manipulation. This is one of the most glaring signals that a relationship is veering into toxic territory. If you notice that your thoughts, emotions, and decisions are regularly being called into question, leaving you to doubt your own perspective and sanity, it's a strong indication that the relationship is unbalanced and perhaps harmful. Manipulation can be subtle or direct, but in its essence, it's when someone tries to distort your reality by undermining your perceptions and beliefs. This might appear as someone incessantly belittling your opinions, suggesting that your experiences or feelings are invalid, or trying to induce guilt or shame so that they can control your behavior. Manipulators often shift blame onto you, twisting situations until you find yourself apologizing for matters that are not your fault. They might use intimidation tactics, thinly veiled threats, or emotional blackmail to corner you into compliance. The manipulator may feign vulnerability or orchestrate dramatic episodes to keep you in a perpetual state of confusion, making you question your own good sense. Some even resort to gaslighting, where they deny events or statements ever occurred, leaving you feeling like you must have imagined them. Over time, constant manipulation leads to pervasive self-doubt and erodes your confidence in your judgments and decisions. You may begin to rely on the manipulator's perspective to navigate daily life, eventually losing a sense of your own identity. In such scenarios, you might also experience a gnawing anxiety around them, always walking on eggshells in fear of triggering another wave of reproaches or manipulative tactics. Your emotional energy becomes consumed by trying to keep the peace or second-guessing how you should speak or act. Yet, no matter how much effort you put into pacifying the manipulator, it never seems sufficient. You might feel perpetually in the wrong, as if you're failing at being the friend, partner, or relative they expect. It's a destructive dynamic that, over time, can leave you mentally drained and spiritually depleted. Recognizing this pattern is a powerful first step. Once you see it for what it is, you can begin to set boundaries. But what if you've tried drawing those boundaries, only for them to be repeatedly bulldozed by manipulative behaviors? That's often the moment when you have to decide whether this relationship can be salvaged, or if the manipulator shows no willingness to change. If the latter is true, it may be time to cut ties altogether for the sake of preserving your own emotional and mental well-being. This choice can be painful, especially if the manipulator is someone you love or have known for years. But understand that manipulation is a destructive force, and if it becomes ingrained in the relationship dynamic, walking away might be your only recourse to reclaim your sense of self and begin the healing process. 2. Lack of support. Healthy relationships should ideally offer you a sense of belonging, warmth, encouragement, and companionship in times of need. You don't necessarily expect a loved one to solve all your problems, but you do expect genuine emotional support, empathy, and sometimes practical assistance. If you notice that you're always left to deal with your struggles alone, or worse, that the person trivializes or dismisses them, this may be a critical sign that the relationship is detrimental rather than beneficial. Lack of support can be recognized when you share your issues, fears, or even joys, and are met with indifference, disinterest, or superficial platitudes. You might never feel like they truly listen or care to offer comfort. One might argue that not everyone is equally adept at providing emotional support. Some people might have trouble expressing empathy, or they may have their own problems interfering with their ability to be fully present. But a persistent pattern of disregard for your well-being crosses a line. Over time, this unresponsiveness can lead to you feeling isolated and exhausted because you have to carry your burdens alone, despite the presence of someone who, in theory, should be a source of help or solace. In more extreme cases, the person may only show up when they need something from you. When you need them, however, they vanish, remain silent, or change the subject to focus on themselves. Healthy relationships involve reciprocity. It doesn't need to be a perfect 50-50 all the time. Life can create imbalances where one person needs more attention than the other at certain junctures. But in the grand scheme, both parties should sense that their emotional needs are being heard and respected. If your attempts to communicate this concern lead nowhere, or if your pleas for more presence, understanding, or help are met with dismissive or evasive responses, it might be time to seriously consider whether this relationship truly enhances your life or primarily erodes your emotional reserves. In the case of family or longtime friends, cutting off contact due to lack of support can feel drastic, but maintaining a bond that drains you may do more harm in the long run. Deciding what is best for you ultimately requires introspection about how this pattern has impacted your mental health and overall resilience. 3. Excessive complaining. Being around someone who constantly complains about their life, their job, the world, you name it, can be emotionally draining. Of course, we all need to vent sometimes. Life brings obstacles and frustrations that require empathy from loved ones. However, there is a difference between occasional venting and the type of endless negativity that pervades every conversation. A chronic complainer often seems to revel in negativity. They might shut down solutions you propose or respond to positivity with cynicism, leaving you feeling weighed down after every encounter. This relentless negativity does more than simply dampen the mood. It can alter your own outlook, making it harder for you to stay optimistic. The emotional climate becomes polluted by gloom, leaving little space for uplifting or balanced conversations. Moreover, excessive complaining can erect barriers that prevent genuine connection. Instead of having reciprocal, engaging dialogue, you find yourself acting as a sounding board for constant gripes. Over time, you might stop sharing your own joys or struggles because the dynamic revolves entirely around their lamentations. This can create feelings of being unacknowledged or taken for granted. If you bring up your own burdens, they might quickly revert to their issues, making you feel invisible. To be sure, it's worth exploring whether someone is complaining excessively due to deeper mental health issues, such as depression or anxiety. In such cases, providing support or gently suggesting professional help can be an act of compassion. Yet, if you've offered such suggestions and the complaining persists without any effort to seek solutions, you may need to reconsider your role. Sometimes, the chronic complainer isn't seeking real help. They only want an audience for their negativity. If you gently set boundaries, for instance, by limiting the time or circumstances you listen to their complaints, and they disregard or disrespect these boundaries, it becomes clear that they value their venting more than they value your comfort. Ultimately, prolonged exposure to this negativity can weaken your own emotional resilience. Making the decision to step away or end a relationship is never easy, but in certain situations, it becomes a matter of self-preservation. You deserve an environment that fosters growth, understanding, and positivity, not one that constantly undermines your well-being with endless complaints and no willingness to change. For feeling exhausted after every interaction. In healthy relationships, time spent together generally feels enriching or at least balanced. Even if you deal with challenging matters or support each other through difficulties, there's an underlying sense of mutual respect and reciprocity that sustains you. However, if you find yourself feeling utterly drained, anxious, or numb after seeing a particular person, be it a relative, a friend, or a colleague, this is a strong sign that the relationship is imbalanced. You might be giving far more than you receive, or it could be that the person's behavior or energy is deeply taxing. People who are perpetually self-focused, manipulative, or thrive on drama can be significant sources of emotional fatigue. When you think about your next meeting or conversation with them, do you feel dread? Do you imagine scenarios in your head where you try to keep the peace, or, on the flip side, daydream about how you could avoid them altogether? Such feelings are not random. They are indicators that this bond is not supporting your well-being. Emotional exhaustion can manifest in various ways. Persistent headaches, difficulty concentrating, feeling resentful or short-tempered, even physical fatigue that seems to come out of nowhere. Sometimes we ignore these signals because we tell ourselves that family is family, or that we have a responsibility to keep the peace. Yet over time, this exhaustion seeps into other areas of our lives, affecting our productivity, relationships with others, and overall emotional health. It's essential to evaluate what specifically causes that exhaustion. Are you always playing the role of peacemaker, mediator, or therapist for the other person? Do your attempts to express your own feelings go unnoticed or invalidated? Identifying the root can help you decide how to address the imbalance. Maybe you set boundaries, limiting the topics you discuss or the length of your interactions. But if these boundaries are repeatedly dismissed, it's a telling sign that the person either doesn't respect your well-being or prefers a dynamic where you consistently bear the emotional brunt. At that juncture, asking yourself whether continued association is worth your health and peace of mind is crucial. Sometimes, the answer leads to a tough decision. Cutting ties might ultimately free you from a relentless cycle of mental and emotional depletion. 5. Lack of trust. Trust is a cornerstone for any meaningful relationship. If you cannot trust someone with your feelings, your vulnerabilities, or even basic honesty, you're likely to experience ongoing anxiety and emotional turmoil. Lack of trust can arise in many forms. Perhaps they lied to you repeatedly in the past, shared your confidences without your permission, or made promises they never kept. Over time, these betrayals accumulate, making it hard to believe their words or rely on their support. This instability corrodes genuine intimacy. You might start withholding pieces of yourself for fear of betrayal. The weight of suspicion creates a mental burden, preventing you from relaxing in the person's presence. When trust is missing, every interaction becomes a potential minefield. You might feel compelled to constantly fact-check or second-guess what they say. In turn, you might also become more secretive or guarded, anticipating the next betrayal. This dynamic ensures that the connection never feels truly safe or comfortable. Some relationships manage to recover from trust breaches, especially if the party who broke trust actively works to rebuild it. Rebuilding involves consistent honesty, genuine remorse, and patience over a period of time. Trust once lost can take months or years to restore. But if the person continues to break your trust or dismisses your concerns, you're left with an environment of chronic insecurity. In some family settings, the expectation of loyalty is strong, but it's possible to recognize that continuing to expose yourself to betrayal does you more harm than good. The same logic applies to close friendships or romantic relationships. If your repeated requests for honesty and reliability are dismissed, the choice to preserve your peace by cutting ties may be the healthiest route. You deserve relationships where trust is mutual and anchored by genuine respect, not ones in which you live in constant fear of betrayal or suspicion. Confronting the reality of a lack of trust can be painful, but it can also serve as a protective measure, shielding you from ongoing hurt and allowing you the space to cultivate relationships with people who honor your vulnerability and reciprocate your faith in them. 6. Excessive self-aggrandizement. Many of us have encountered individuals who turn every conversation toward themselves, trumpeting their achievements, talents, or opinions, often at the expense of acknowledging your experiences or viewpoints. While self-confidence is admirable, there's a stark difference between healthy pride and narcissistic self-absorption. If a person close to you is constantly inflating their own importance and ignoring your life, your feelings, or your input, the relationship becomes demoralizing. You might leave interactions feeling overshadowed, unseen, or irrelevant. Over time, this skewed focus can chip away at your self-esteem as your attempts to share your own joys or challenges fall flat. People who engage in excessive self-aggrandizement seldom pause to validate or show curiosity about your reality. They may monopolize gatherings, retelling stories of their feats or conquests, with little concern about how others are experiencing the conversation. In some cases, they may also disparage you, directly or indirectly, to reinforce their sense of superiority. Alternatively, if you manage to squeeze in a bit about your life, they might hastily interrupt or pivot to something about themselves. Initially, you might try to be patient, assuming they just need a bit more attention or that it's a temporary phase. But when it becomes a consistent pattern, you risk normalizing a one-sided dynamic that offers little room for authentic exchange. If you've made attempts to steer the conversation toward more reciprocal territory, asking them open-ended questions about what they feel, telling them how you'd appreciate more interest in your life, and you're met with disinterest or further self-promotion, you have a serious issue. Real emotional connection is about give and take. You share, they listen. They share, you listen. Each person's experiences matter. Without this balance, the relationship devolves into an ongoing monologue from the self-centered individual, leaving you feeling like a prop in someone else's drama. Over time, resentment might take root. Being aware of the negative impact this has on your well-being can spur you to reassess whether any attempts to salvage the relationship would be fruitful. If they chronically refuse to acknowledge your needs or perspective, Parting ways may be less about punishing them and more about preserving your sense of self-worth. 7. A one-sided dynamic. This particular problem occurs when the other person not only talks incessantly about themselves, but shows little to no willingness to engage with or learn about your feelings, ideas, or concerns. It might begin innocently. Maybe the person is going through a tough time and needs more attention, but a persistent imbalance, where you never feel heard or valued, signals a deeper relational problem. A one-sided dynamic might also manifest in acts of kindness or effort. You go out of your way to be there for them, but they never reciprocate. You constantly check in on their emotional state, but your own struggles remain invisible. Often, such an imbalance grows worse over time unless it's addressed, because the person receiving all the attention becomes accustomed to it. Feeling ignored or disrespected is not something trivial. It can erode your self-esteem. You might wonder if your experiences or emotions simply aren't as compelling. Or perhaps you're overshadowed by the other person's strong personality, left struggling to insert yourself into the relationship. You might cope by withdrawing further, resigning yourself to a background role. Yet, this only leads to greater dissatisfaction and frustration. In healthy relationships, there's a natural ebb and flow. One person might lead the conversation sometimes, and then the other person steps in. The beauty is in the synergy and mutual respect for each other's voices. When you try to communicate how one-sided it feels and get stonewalled or dismissed, it's an even more telling sign. Sometimes, a heart-to-heart about these concerns can prompt a course correction. But if the person shows no genuine concern or interest in creating a more balanced, reciprocal space, you might ask yourself, is this how I want to spend my energy and time? Do I deserve a relationship where I am perpetually overshadowed and undervalued? The answer is likely no. And from there, you must discern whether you want to limit contact, set firmer boundaries, or end the relationship altogether. It is not selfish to seek balanced bonds. It is an essential aspect of healthy human connection. 8. Boundary violations. Personal boundaries are fundamental to maintaining autonomy, dignity, and emotional security. They delineate what we're comfortable with, how we expect to be treated, and the space we need to feel safe, psychologically and physically. When someone repeatedly ignores these boundaries, prying into your personal matters, belittling your preferences, pushing you to do things you're uncomfortable with, or failing to respect your physical space, they are violating a crucial aspect of mutual respect. Such transgressions can make you feel powerless or invaded. You might find yourself justifying their actions, telling yourself they mean well or don't understand, but repeated boundary violations, especially after you've stated your limits, indicate an unwillingness to honor your dignity. These violations can be subtle, persistent jokes that disregard your comfort level, or overt, like pressuring you into situations that clearly go against your values. If you attempt to clarify or reinforce your boundaries and are met with arguments, ridicule, or attempts to guilt trip you, that's a major red flag. Boundaries exist to protect your emotional and physical well-being, and a person who refuses to respect them is effectively telling you that they prioritize their own desires over your sense of safety. Over time, living under the constant threat of having your boundaries crossed can lead to heightened anxiety, stress, and a pervasive sense that you cannot trust this individual. While some boundary violations may stem from ignorance or poor communication, patterns of disregard suggest a deeper problem. In certain family structures, for instance, older relatives might believe they have the right to intrude or criticize you because of cultural norms or hierarchical assumptions. Similarly, certain long-term friendships might operate on unspoken rules that disregard personal autonomy. If you find that after multiple clarifications, the person shows no intent to honor your boundaries, you have to consider whether there's any route to a healthier dynamic. If the answer is no, cutting off contact can become a powerful step toward reclaiming your sense of control. Even though it might bring temporary heartbreak or family tension, safeguarding your autonomy and peace ultimately takes precedence. 9. Lack of respect. This is perhaps the most encompassing red flag, as many of the aforementioned issues, like manipulation, boundary violations, or dismissing your needs, fall under the broader umbrella of disrespect. Respect implies recognizing another person's worth, feelings, perspectives, and rights. It doesn't mean you have to agree on everything, but you treat each other with consideration and courtesy. When respect is absent, the relationship is vulnerable to a host of toxic behaviors: name-calling, condescension, mocking, or more subtle forms of contempt. In a disrespectful dynamic, one person may dismiss the other's ideas or experiences as trivial, even ridiculing them in front of others. Such behavior can deal serious blows to your self-esteem, instilling a lingering sense of shame or inferiority. Even small acts of disrespect, such as eye-rolling, interrupting you constantly, or trivializing your accomplishments, can accumulate into a toxic environment. Over time, you might find yourself dreading interactions because you anticipate hurtful or degrading remarks. In more severe cases, disrespect escalates into outright verbal or emotional abuse, systematically eroding your sense of self. Trying to improve a disrespectful relationship may involve direct confrontation, therapy, or mediation, especially if it's a family tie you cannot sever lightly. However, change can only occur if the disrespectful individual acknowledges the harm and commits to altering their behavior. Without that, you face an ongoing cycle of devaluation. Choosing to cut contact or significantly reduce interaction in such scenarios might be the only path left to preserve your emotional health. It can be a painful realization, particularly when deeply entrenched beliefs suggest we should remain loyal to parents, siblings, or longtime friends. Yet, a relationship that thrives on disrespect chips away at your well-being, sometimes leaving scars that are difficult to heal. Recognizing this and having the courage to step away, despite the familial or social pressures you may face, demonstrates a profound act of self-respect. In conclusion, understanding that sometimes it is necessary to cut off all contact, even with family or friends, is never an easy insight to arrive at. We grow up hearing messages about the permanence of family ties or the unbreakable bonds of close friendships. And while these notions can have merit, they are not universally applicable when harm overshadows love and respect. Each of the 9 signs outlined here points to a scenario where your emotional, mental, or even physical well-being is systematically compromised. If you see these patterns in your relationships, it's worth pausing to evaluate whether the potential for positive change truly exists, or if you're merely hoping for someone to transform who has little incentive to do so. The decision to end a relationship might feel like a betrayal of cherished ideals, but in many cases, it is the ultimate act of self-preservation and self-love. Cutting ties is not an act of vengeance or cruelty. It is an affirmation of your worth and a refusal to remain entangled in a dynamic that undermines your stability and happiness. Sometimes, removing yourself from a toxic situation also serves as a catalyst for the other person to confront their behavior, though you should not depend on that outcome to justify your choice. If the relationship has become thoroughly corrosive, you must focus on your own healing, ensuring that you have the space to recover and rebuild. You deserve relationships that offer support, inspiration, and opportunities for both personal and spiritual growth. In some instances, the act of severing contact is permanent. In others, it might be temporary until you or the other person has done the necessary internal work for a healthier interaction. But no matter what the future holds, the priority is to honor your emotional and mental balance in the present. It's natural to feel guilt or sorrow. After all, relationships, even the unhealthy ones, often come with precious memories or emotional attachments. Permit yourself to grieve the end of what once was, or the potential of what you hoped it could be. However, also grant yourself the clarity to see that clinging to a damaging bond can prevent you from experiencing healthier, more fulfilling connections. Always remember that you have both the right and the responsibility to protect your inner well-being. This is not just a matter of self-interest. It's also how you stay strong enough to show up authentically in your other relationships and endeavors. A person who is persistently weighed down by toxic connections may struggle to be fully present for the people who genuinely care for them. In freeing yourself, you free up emotional and mental space for growth, for building new and nourishing relationships, and for cultivating a sense of peace that radiates into all areas of your life. Thank you, as always, for following us until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the Mental Dose channel and to our Telegram channel, which you can find in the description, for more insights about personal and spiritual growth. These topics are crucial in learning to navigate life with greater wisdom and self-awareness. If any of the signs we've mentioned resonate with you, know that you are not alone in facing such challenges, and that help, whether from professionals, support groups, or compassionate friends, can make a significant difference as you move forward. Honor yourself, your emotional state, and remember, you deserve nurturing, uplifting connections that inspire you to become the best version of yourself. Always prioritize relationships that energize and encourage you, while having the discernment to know when it's time to step away from those that do the opposite. See you very soon in the next video.